Hi readers, Lee here. Welcome back to my channel, Lyla Wanders and Reads, where I can't talk already. And welcome to my December reading recap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Only 10 books this month. Usually I average between 12 and 16. This was rough for me. Again, the past 3 months have been really rough for me. And I've noticed that with this last book that I'm finishing tonight, something's changed in me, I think. It may be some of my choices, but I think something's changed in me in my reading likes over the past year. So let's just get to it. I'm not going to do the synopses of these books. I'm just going to tell you what they are, a little bit about them, and my thoughts about them. So I started the month with Chloe Cates is Missing by Mandy McHugh. This was recommended to me by Sadie Hartman, and she based it on the fact that I like Monday's Not Coming. To me, this is not comparable, but nothing against Sadie Hartman on that. Monday's Not Coming was such a special book that it's a hard bar to live up to, if that's the right metaphor. I did like some of this, and there was enough where I wasn't sure what was going on. Here's what it was. Sometimes authors make pronouncements in their books, and that's something I noticed in the last book that I'm finishing tonight. Statements where there's just, and I've done this myself in my writing, got called out on it by a teacher one time, and even in my post I do it. But they make these grand statements because they want to be profound or whatever. Here's one. Two characters are talking about social media, because this is a book about social media. I really love that aspect of it. They can't learn how to survive when they've been spoon-fed garbage their whole lives. Okay, that's a 15-year-old boy talking? Not any of the ones I've ever known. Anywho, Chloe Cates' mother is like a stage mom, only for social media, and she pushes and pushes her daughter to do this and this and that, because Chloe is the face behind Cece and Me, a web series that's a hit. Well, now Chloe is missing, and another young girl has been murdered, so the race is on to find Chloe. It's not a terrible book. Like I said, the only thing that bothered me was the pronouncements, and there was another one or two in here. Oh, platitudes? I don't know. Perspective is what matters. The detail that gives hindsight is shimmery appeal. I don't need those kind of statements in my books. And again, I've been guilty of it myself. That was just, when it pulls me out of the story, that's an issue. I'm going to be bitching a lot, apparently, on this reading recap, because the next one, so much of it was like a warm cardigan. But then this thing happened at the end, and I lost my fucking mind. That is Done and Dusted by Lyla Sage. At some point in at some point in 2025, I am probably going to do, if I find more examples of it, a video on romance and our internalized misogyny and things that we think that are acceptable and are not. But let's start talking about Done and Dusted. So Clementine Emmy Ryder has come home after suffering a fall from a horse. It doesn't say that on the back, but I'll go ahead and say that out there. Spoiler. So she's gone home to kind of tend her wounds, get her shit together, and figure out how to get back up on the horse, metaphorically speaking. Again, I love so much of it. It was so comfortable. There is a little insta-love, and it is a little too insta, but I let it slide because, again, so comfortable. This is, of course, when she gets home, she falls in love with her brother's best friend, who grew up with the family. So I can see where there kind of could be an ick factor there. If someone has grown up with your family so long that they're like your family, it can be a borderline creepy. But they fall in love. It's a romance, to be expected. And one of the most funny, I think, comments that I've seen on Goodreads reviews of this is about how often he calls her sugar. And 100% yes. He calls her sugar so often that I think he might have forgotten her fucking name. And again, I don't have anything against terms of endearment, but literally, at one point he started calling her sugar and then he never said her name again. But then towards the end, and there's a spoiler here, but I don't care because this is what made me, like, see red. She runs up to the boy. His name is Luke. I forgot his name. We'll just call him Sugar. So she walks up to Luke, runs up to Luke after she finishes something successful, and she throws herself into his arms and kisses him. Her brother sees this happen and then runs up and punches Luke. Like, what the fuck? First of all, and this is where the internalized misogyny is, everybody in the book treats that like it's acceptable. Like, first of all, Sugar, the dude, does not come up to her, grab her, and kiss her. I could maybe let it slide had that happened and her brother maybe thought that the guy was attacking her. But no, she went to him, she voluntarily kissed him. And everybody's just like, oh, that's just Gus. Yeah, Gus is a dick. Gus has anger management problems. Gus is a... Finally, he apologizes. I'm sorry he punched you, but you know, that's my first instinct when I see someone kissing my sister. If your first instinct when your sister kisses someone is to go punch that individual, you have a problem. And it infuriates me that she wrote that and no one holds Gus accountable. It's just Gus being Gus. There's a book in the series that I'll finish, by the way, that has Gus being the love interest, and I've got to wait probably a good 6 months before I can move on with the series until I can calm down a little bit, because it really infuriates me that the author just plays that off like it's acceptable behavior for anyone. First of all, Gus should not only have to apologize, he should do some fucking penance on that. And the sister, if I was the sister, Emmy or whatever her name was, Sugar, she should have confronted him and said, you need to get your shit together and get out of my life. But none of that happened. No, that's normal behavior. That's Gus being protective. Bullshit. Okay. So both average reads. The second one was such a great read, such a comforting read until it got to the point where it pissed me off. Next up, I read Orbital, which was this year's Booker Prize winner. And this was okay for me. I did a Booker project this year where I read several books from the long list, and 2 were on my best books of the year. Neither of them obviously won. And then James, which I think everybody thought was going to win, but Percival Everett, I liked all of them better than this. The ones that, the Safekeep, My Friends, and James, I liked better than Orbital. And Orbital is great. There is some lyrical writing in there, and there are some parts I really connected with. I enjoy the poetry of her writing. There is a lot of listing. She lists things, and that's been a common complaint of reviewers. A thing that you'll notice with me is repetition is a problem. When it comes to Done and Dusted, sugar, 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 sugar. And this was list, 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 list. And so at some point, I kind of get tired of that. So I know nothing about how the Booker panel makes their judgments. I've read what they said. I don't remember what it is right now. But this didn't resonate with me. Nothing happened. And I didn't expect anything to really happen because they're on a space shuttle. And it is not, even from the back, this isn't a suspense, this isn't a thriller, they're just going to do their time. There was this moment at the end where there was something that she mentions, and I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great if that's the way that it ended? But it did not end that way, and it would have been involving the death of everybody aboard, but it didn't. So for me, Orbital was just an okay read. It did have mixed responses to it being selected as the Booker Prize winner. Some people were overjoyed by it. Some people it really resonated with. I'm more on the other team where I kind of wanted something to happen. There were other books that I read that I loved a lot more. I only finished one audiobook in December. That was The Skystone by Jack Whyte. I have been in a kind of Arthurian mood lately, and I enjoyed The Skystone when I read it probably 20, 30 years ago. So I thought I'd re-listen to this. What this is, more than when I think of the Arthurian saga, I think of magic and Merlin, and that is not what... I had to make sure that wouldn't work. That was not what we get here. This is more Arthur from a historical fiction standpoint, and it was good. I'm considering moving on with the series, but not right away. Here's why. Repetition again. They use the word whoreson for like bastard or something like that. It's whoreson, but shortened. But they use it all the time. Like everybody's a whoreson, and it's over and over and over until I'm finally like, okay, I got it. Can we move on? I think sometimes in writing, you can use something like dialect once and then have it implied throughout the book. The same thing with whoreson. I don't think he needed to repeat it that many times. If I were reading it, I might have been able to skim over it, but listening to it and hearing it, I'm not, obviously, not opposed to curse words or calling people... I am opposed to calling people names in most cases. But hearing it over and over and over, it just kind of got stale. And speaking of stale, the 5th book that I read this past month also didn't resonate with me. And I looked to, hey, some people really love this book. And if I don't like something that you like, that is completely fine. You can love something, and I don't want to, rain on your parade by not loving it, but I am going to say what I think about the book, and I'd like to hear different people's perspective. But the plot was boring to me. Even at the very end where something was happening, it was just boring. I had to really force myself through this book, and so this is a story about a writer who, air quotes, steals an idea from a former student who died. Only, you can't really steal an idea, and the writer didn't do anything wrong in what he did, but then all of a sudden somebody's stalking him, and it just... I say stalking, online, sending emails, stuff like that. And it just didn't resonate with me. I didn't like the main character, Jake. And even like I said, at the very end, when you find out who it's been, but you knew all along, it just, like, I had to force myself to concentrate on it. It was just boring. And that is all I've got to say. I actually have the sequel to the plot, and I'm not at all interested in reading it anytime soon. I don't even know if I'll keep it. But it was a disappointment because this was on the New York Times 100 Notable Books of 2021, and it just was not a fit for me. After that, I went for something a little bit light, and that is If I'm Being Honest by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegemund-Broka. This is a take on The Taming of the Shrew. I've read another one of their books. I liked this. What I said, I think, when I did my review of it is I could, if I wanted to, spend time poking holes in this, talking about plot holes, mentioning this or that character, but I didn't want to because I loved the writing style. It worked for me. In this, Cameron is tired of hearing herself being called a bitch, and when the guy she likes, or thinks she likes, or thinks is good enough for her, calls her out on her bad behavior, she decides to tame herself. And along the way, her interests change, let's just say that. And I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. It was a breath of fresh air after the plot because I didn't have to force myself. And towards, I'll just, minor spoiler-ish, towards the end, I found this quote in here, and I was like, this right here, sister, when she talks about her initial love interest, and she said, if we're going to be more than, if we're going to be more than friends, why is it always me working my hardest to be enough for him? Right on, sister. I'm about to have a collapse over there. Okay. I still needed something that I knew would be good. I had a DNF between those two books. I don't have it here. Next year, I'm going to try to be more accountable on that. So when I threw a book, I didn't throw it across the room. I tossed it over to the side because I couldn't do it anymore. So I picked up something by an author whose work I know I've enjoyed before. That is Alison Cochrun, The Charm Offensive. Like I said, I've read her and loved her before, and this was no different. This is based in a reality TV show. This is kind of like The Bachelor, and the Bachelor in this situation is going on to date with like 20 women, but he's awkward and he's not good on camera, and he ends up falling for one of the producers. So cute. It treats neurodivergence well. I liked their relationship. I loved everything about this book. This was a great, cozy read, and it was much better than the romance that I had tossed across the room when I realized that I could not anymore with that. After The Charm Offensive, I decided to sit down with my purse book, which I had been reading all month. And there was a point in this where I considered giving up, not because it was not good, but because it was intimidating for me. The writing was easy, the writing was beautiful, but I think it was the size. And yet, when I finished, and the next night when I did not have this book to sit down with, I missed sitting down with Lonesome Dove. This won the Pulitzer Prize. I don't remember what year it did. I loved his writing style. When I compare this to Orbital, which won the Booker Prize, not the Pulitzer, when I compare this to this wins hands down. And I think this is something I've learned about me. In this, stuff happens. It's not just people thinking. If I want overthinking, I can be inside my own head. But in Lonesome Dove, stuff happens. A lot of stuff happens. It made me laugh. It made me tear up. I didn't ever cry. I think because sometimes I was so stunned, I was like, is this gonna happen? And then it did. So, and in that way, it's kind of like Game of Thrones because no one is safe. This is the third in Larry McMurtry's tetralogy, but I believe this is the first that was published. And if I go back to Lonesome Dove world, I will probably listen to the book that in the timeline of the series comes after this, where it's after the end of this and what happens next, just to find out what happens to a couple of characters. I won't read it, I will probably audio it, but for the most part, this was complete in and of itself. I loved it. You know, Gus and Call are two former Army Rangers, and one of the things that I thought about when I was reading this is, you know, what happens when old soldiers retire and what do you do now? And so this was really about their last hurrah before, you know, they'd had a couple years settled down, but this was one last big adventure before they were probably too old to have any adventures. I guess. I'm not sure what happens after this. I don't think I included this in my favorite books of the year, but will be a book that I think about for a long time. I love, see, it's funny leaving a place, ain't it? He said. You never do know when you'll get back. And that's kind of like a statement, but when it came in the context of what Larry McMurtry wrote in this novel, it doesn't feel preachy. It's perfect. The writing is perfect, in my opinion. He makes a statement without making it sound like it's a grand pronouncement on, you know, I've discovered the truth behind life and this is it. And this was very lifelike. There were comedic moments that at one point I wrote, is this like the Three Stooges? And then there were, you know, hard moments and sad moments and tragic moments. It's just, I am getting better, but after I finished this, I was really at a loss for words. I am so glad I did not give it up. I will try not to let size intimidate me. I've read books just as long, horror. I think what I should have done, I've been so used to reading a book in 2 nights, max 3, that when this took me much longer, I think it made me anxious. Because usually I post one day, I started a book, the next day I finished it on my shorts, and I couldn't do that when I was reading this. But I've got some ideas for next year, so I don't feel that kind of anxiety about needing to post on social media. I'm going to spend time with books, and I'm going to enjoy it, and I'll tell you about it. Okay. No sooner do I buy this entire series, which this is the most recent book, and this was actually my least favorite book. It is free on Kindle Unlimited, the entire series is, but I bought hard copies because up until this one, I really liked most of the books. I started probably last book having some issues, and I'm talking about Deck the Fire Halls by N.R. Walker. This is a queer romance series set in the town of Hartbridge, Montana. And the first 3, I'd say, I really loved. They were perfect, cozy romances, a little bit spicy, but I skimmed through the spice most of the time anyway. And it's really small town romances and them finding their community, but then it just kind of gets stale. Nothing new happens. Everything is the same. You know, a new guy comes to town, he falls in love with the single available hot guy, and they hook up, and then they end up in a relationship. It is always a monogamous relationship, so I appreciate that. But there were two things I want to talk about specifically to this, but the other thing I noticed in probably the last book, number 4, is I couldn't tell who who was who. The guys were all blurring together with me, except for Hamish, who was from book 1, who I kind of worried maybe a little bit of a caricature, but I've seen other people online who don't have that issue with that character. But the guys were so alike, except for some minor things, that sometimes I didn't know who was talking. The one thing frustrated me in here. So these books are told through both the men. So we'll start out with Rob and Soren are the characters in this one. Starts out with Rob, who's the new guy, and then I'll go to a chapter with Soren. So there's a chapter with Soren, and I don't remember what happens. But then you go to the Rob chapter, and Rob starts telling you exactly what happened in the last chapter, and I wrote down, we know this, we read the last chapter, because it wasn't just, it wasn't even that she was telling it from his perspective. She wasn't doing that. I mean, obviously she was, but she was just repeating what you already saw happen. And I think that there could have been a much better way to do that. Another thing, and this may have come up in another of the novels, and it didn't bother me, but in this one, it kept coming up and coming up and coming up, and it really annoyed me. And that is the age issue. Soren in this was 28. Rob is like 35 or 36. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge age gap at that age. It would be different if, one of them was underage or 20 and 36, But she just goes on and on about it. Soren can't believe he thinks a man, he can never think of a man older than him as sexy. And then one of the other couples is like, ask Soren, how is it, or ask Rob, see, I don't know the difference sometimes. How is it dating a younger man? Fun, isn't it? And she just went on and on like it was this huge age gap, but it really, really wasn't. Or at least maybe that's me, 54 years old, looking back and saying that's a lot closer than age than someone like in their early 20s and mid 30s. So that was kind of a disappointment. If she comes out with another book, and it's free on Kindle Unlimited in this series, I will read it, but it's just kind of getting stale now, and that's what I'll say. I mean, I loved it at the very beginning. It was new, it was fresh, but that's really what the thing is. There's not much new and fresh on it. So, gosh, this has been, all I've done is bitch about most of these books, except for Lonesome Dove and The Charm Offensive, and if I'm being honest. My final book of December is going to be The Keeper of Happy Endings by Barbara Davis. Probably. I say probably not because I don't think I'll finish this. I'll finish it. I started last night and I got well past the halfway mark and had to stop myself because they made us go back to work today. I'm recording this on a Monday. And I was like, oh shit, I can't just stay up and read all night. I have to go to bed. So I'll finish this. Obviously right now I don't know the conclusion. I had a little bit of a hard time getting started. She's talking about depression at the beginning of this book, but then the mom of one of the characters suggests she goes to therapy, and the young woman replies, "You think I'm crazy?" And granted, it's set in 1985. That's probably an appropriate reaction for that time. But I'm not sure why I struggled with this. Obviously, I didn't struggle too much, right? I mean, if I read this much, it's a good writing style. But that's where, I think at the beginning I said that I think something in me has changed. My expectations have changed. And it's not all highbrow books, because the plot, which was on the New York Times most notable list for 2021 didn't work for me. Orbital didn't really work for me, but Lonesome Dove did, and The Charm Offensive did. So a lot of it has to do with does anything happen, and repetitiveness, and I love World War II books, but that's where repetitive comes in. Sometimes they are so much alike that, this person was in France and they were part of the resistance and they escaped, or they didn't escape, and there's a lost love, and at the very end they find something that they've lost. So it's the same story over and over. And I think if I had not read so much World War II nonfiction, or fiction and nonfiction, in the past 2 years, it may not bother me as much, but I think it will be a minute before I need to read another World War II book. And so my plan is to finish this tonight, probably not read anything on New Year's Eve, we'll see. And then on the 1st, I will start my first book of January. Initially, it was going to be Sisters in Arms by Kyle Alderson. I still want to read this fairly soon. There's a movie, 6888, on Netflix. I watched that this weekend. For me, that was just okay. I can't put my finger really on why it wasn't over the top for me, but it made me hesitant to read this. But more than that, this made me hesitant to read that, because this is also about World War II, and it's about a story that needs to be told. Black women who served in World War II, the only black women who were Oconus in World War II. So I want to get to this year, but I don't think it needs to be so close on the heels of The Keeper of Happy Endings. So instead, probably, and I reserve the right to change my mind, I will be reading Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. This also won the Pulitzer Prize, and I swear I'm not doing a Pulitzer Prize project, but there is a movie out about the Nickel Boys. I've not seen it. It's not in my area. I don't know if it's a limited release. I don't know if it's going to come to my area, but this is about loosely based on the Dover School for Boys in Florida that ran a lot longer than it probably should have, and I will talk more about this in a short or something, in another video. Anywho, so this is what I intend right now to start the year with, but I've already changed my mind once. And again, I reserve the right to change my mind again. Anywho, that is it for me. I hope that 2025 is better reading wise. I've had a really rough couple of months and apparently trouble talking now. And with various reasons, sometimes bad choices, sometimes what was going on politically in the world, and sometimes just what was going on with me. December probably wasn't helped by the fact that I got sick mid-month, took a couple days off work and reading, and that doesn't make you feel positive about things. Anywho, that is it for me for 2024. Happy reading!